Let's start with Jason and we'll start our meeting. Okay, I'll call to order this public council meeting for the corporation of the township of Renown in Raglan. This 8th day of February 2026 at 7:03 p.m. Roll call, Councillor Banks.
Here.
Councillor Coppell.
Here.
Councillor Keller.
Here.
Councillor Quad.
Present.
We have a resolution to adopt the agenda that the council for the corporation of the township of Renown and Raglan adopt the agenda as submitted. Can I get a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Keller, seconded by Councillor Coppell. Any comments, questions? I'll call for the vote then. All those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? None. The motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of interest with anything on the agenda tonight for any member of council? Seeing none. Okay, there's a statutory requirement that prior to the passing of zoning bylaw, that we hold a public meeting. This public meeting has been convened to listen to the comments of the public regarding the proposal of the new zoning bylaw in accordance with the Ontario Planning Act. No decisions will be made to approve or reduce the bylaw this evening. This bylaw was presented to us at our last regular council meeting. It is a draft document. Council has had we have looked at it ourselves personally, but council has had no discussions or any comments regarding it, either for or against. With the meeting that was held last Wednesday evening, the comments that were received by the county planning staff have been documented, and anything that's coming in writing, and any comments from this meeting tonight will be compiled and presented to council. At that time, council will look at them and they will discuss them and make decisions on if there's parts of it we don't like, we can change or whatever. Parts of it we cannot change because it is dictated by the province. So we're just like everybody else when it comes to that part of the zoning bylaw. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and taking part to be a part of this process. A zoning bylaw is not new to this municipality. The prior townships had zoning bylaws before the amalgamation happened in the year 2000. The county recently, in what would have been the last 5 years, passed an official plan. And because of that, we are governed under the county official plan. So, and with the changes to the provincial policy statements in the Planning Act, it's necessary to update our zoning bylaw. Council will not be making any comments tonight, making no decisions or adopting this bylaw. We need time to review all the comments. What else? In order to comply with our policy of openness and transparency, I will be recommending to council later in this meeting that we give further notice by way of a notice in the tax bills next month in order to ensure that all taxpayers in our municipality receive notice of this. And probably at that point, we would be holding for the public meeting. We're also in the process of hiring a new CEO, and we would like to get comments from him. He probably would have some experience with other municipalities and what works and what doesn't work. So at this time, okay, I guess I have to read the purpose. The purpose and effect of the new zoning bylaws to regulate the use of land and the erection, location, and use of buildings within the entire municipality. The new zoning bylaw consists of text and a schedule or a map and will implement the County of Renfrew official plan and the provincial planning statements. As part of the proposal, all of the current existing zoning bylaws for the township of Brunel, Lyndoch, and Raglan will be repealed and replaced with the provisions of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. Section 34.14.5 of the Planning Act requires the public be informed of who is entitled to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal under sections 34 sub-11 and 34 sub-19 as follows. Section 34.11, if council decides to refuse an application or refuses or neglects to make a decision on an application within 90 days of the municipal clerk receiving the application, the applicant or the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the county. Section 34.19, not later than 20 days after the giving of notice of passing of the bylaw, the applicant, a specified person or public body, a registered owner of any land to which the bylaw would apply, made oral submissions at the public meeting, or made a written submission to council before the bylaw was passed, or the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk. And a public notice was given, clerk's report.
So public notice was given in the paper on January 21st and further again on January 28th, which exceeded the minimum requirements of the Planning Act. It was also posted on the township website and social media.
Thank you. Okay, we have two representatives from the County of Renfrew as the county prepares our draft plans for all of the counties in their jurisdiction. So Lindsay Bennett, she's a senior planner with the County of Renfrew, and she'll provide an overview of the proposed plan.
Thank you, Chair and Councillor Brunel, Lyndoch, and Raglan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lindsay, and I am a planner with the County of Renfrew. The township has requested our assistance in the preparation of this updated zoning bylaw, and I'll be providing a brief presentation regarding the project. So we're just going to go through a little bit of the process. So official plans, as Councillor Young mentioned, are, so we have the County of Renfrew official plan, and they're prepared for municipalities to contain more detailed local policy for implementing matters described in the provincial planning statement. And this township does use the County of Renfrew official plan as their plan. The zoning bylaw is a set of regulations that controls development and establishes specific zones for all properties with the aim of ensuring compatibility between land uses. Those zones are applied to properties and displayed on the accompanying map schedules. So examples of zones include residential, including rural residential, unlimited service residential, commercial, resource areas, and environmental protection. At the open house that we held last week, we heard people ask, what are matters that are outside the municipality's control, and what are areas that can be changed by the municipality? Matters that are outside of any municipality's control and have to be included in zoning bylaws are based on provincial interests, such as identified mineral aggregate areas, setbacks to waste disposal sites, environmentally sensitive areas, and administrative transportation requirements. The separation distance from aggregate resources, so those lands that are zoned mineral pit and mineral pit reserve on the maps, are also outside of the municipality's control. Items that the township could change and customize for the township include lot line setbacks, heights of buildings, and whether to allow or not allow certain types of uses such as recreational vehicles, backyard chickens, or sea camps. A question that's often raised is how changes to the zoning bylaw may affect property taxes. The Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, MPAC, is responsible for assigning assessed values to properties for taxation purposes. It is important to understand that the zoning bylaw and MPAC's property assessments are separate matters. MPAC assesses properties based on the actual use of the property, not its zoning category, and by analyzing the sale of comparable properties within the area. MPAC assesses a property on the actual use, not what it's zoned for. So this, if the bylaw were to be passed, does not impact taxation. Next, I'll just review the process. So under the Planning Act, the township is required to go through this process of updating its zoning bylaw to ensure that the bylaw conforms to both provincial policy and an updated official plan. This draft zoning bylaw has been prepared by our office with input from the local municipal staff who use it daily for their work, as well as from council. The goal is to improve the clarity and ease of use while meeting both provincial requirements and local needs. As other municipalities within the county are also updating their zoning bylaws, our office developed a template document to standardize common provisions across municipalities. This approach not only streamlines the bylaw creation process, but also promotes consistency for property owners, developers, and municipal staff that work across different municipalities. This zoning bylaw update does not review or support any specific projects, nor does it make changes to facilitate new private development. Any proponent of a development proposal must follow the procedures set out under the Planning Act. So if the zoning bylaw amendment is required to accommodate a proposed development, then a site-specific zoning bylaw application must be made and submitted, and then that approval process must be completed. So the draft mapping that we had shown at the open house last week included abandoned mine sites along with a 1,000 meter buffer around those sites. We have since removed those sites and their associated buffers from the mapping. And the revised map only now shows one mining reserve area within the township, which is more accurately reflects maintenance. For the draft zoning bylaw, there are parts of the proposed bylaw that remain unchanged. However, I'm just going to go over some of the main changes to the bylaw. So the first one is that there's a new provision for a sleep cabin or a bunkie. So if you have a waterfront property that has a minimum lot size of 0.4 hectares, which is 1 acre, you're able to have a sleep cabin. And this sleep cabin / bunkie is required to be set back 30 meters from the high water mark, and the building would not exceed 18 square meters. Another one is the section on backyard chickens. So PBM chickens are permitted as an accessory use to a dwelling unit, and the location of the chicken coop will have to comply with other setbacks for accessory buildings. There's also potential for allowing bees in a non-farm setting where a property size is 0.5 acres, so 0.2 hectares, and there's specific location requirements in the zoning bylaw. Another one is allowing for 2 dwellings on a property. So with this, you would have to have a minimum lot area of 0.8 hectares, and it's required to share the same dwelling septic. For properties that are over the 2 hectares, an additional dwelling unit is allowed to have their own dwelling septic. So for lots that are they're greater than 0.4 hectares, which is 1 acre, but less than 0.8 hectares, additional dwellings may be considered through the submission of a minor variance. The proposed bylaw permits right now recreational vehicles in all zones in which a dwelling is permitted as a principal use. So the proposed wording was one recreational vehicle may be used for temporary living or sleeping accommodation for no longer than 30 days in a calendar year and for 14 days consecutively for persons in transit between one place and another. There is a section on shoreline activity areas. So the current bylaw restricts buildings and structures emerged from the high water mark. This new proposal will allow limited structures such as small storage sheds, gazebos, saunas, and decks to be constructed within the 30-meter water setback, subject to restrictions like size of the building. So it would not be allowed for pools and hot tubs for a bungee. This bylaw, as I mentioned, includes required separation distances between sensitive uses such as dwellings and the aggregate resources, licensed pits, and mining resources. So for sand and gravel resources and pits, the separation distance is 300 meters. For mining resources, the separation distance is 1,000 meters. So these separation distances are from the province, and the township is required to implement this zoning update. However, there is a new policy in there that does provide for if your entire lot is within that separation distance, you are still allowed to build. If you're on a rural lot that doesn't permit a dwelling and you're entirely within that setback, you are still allowed to build. It's just if you have land outside of that separation distance, that would be where you have to go. So as part of this process, an online interactive version of the zoning schedule has been provided to the township for use by the public. It's also posted on the website. So this is intended to improve the use of ease. So you can go on there and you can search by roll number or address. And it'll pull up your property so you can actually see what the zoning is. And there's also a layer for air photography and some various other tools. Right now, sometimes it's hard to see what properties are zoned, because the mapping is a little older. So, and then after, if this bylaw is passed, after council and staff have been using it for a year, if there's certain things that need to be updated to provide more clarity to the bylaw, a housekeeping bylaw can be submitted to address any of these changes. So this draft zoning bylaw amendment and schedules have been available on the township website. And alternatively, there are new updated copies of the paper maps will also be available starting tomorrow at the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, I'm going to ask if there's any members of the public who wish to provide comment relating to the proposed bylaw to come up to the microphone. You have to provide your name and address. And for the sake of conserving time and ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to address council, it is requested that people with the same or similar comments to a previous comment please refrain from duplicating. The purpose of the meeting is to gather comments from the public. It's not intended to be a forum for back and forth dialogue with council or staff. Staff will prepare a written report summarizing all the comments received during this meeting, as well as any of them that's been submitted in writing. So if anyone has any comments or issues, if you'd like to come forward to the table and state your name and address and state your question or your comments or.
No worries, thank you. Okay, thank you. So, Joel Helmer, 1133 Rochford Road. So my question is, since we. If you're not, since we had that pushback last week with the incorrect map. We have to pick it up tomorrow now. What is our time frame to where we're gonna have? For us to review and bring questions back, because it kind of seems like we've skipped that step now since we were having the review. Under that false map, because it seems like the new map should be. You're right, and so I would think that maybe we could have that. Meeting again to review the current map, because we're having this meeting now without actually seeing that current map. And those setback zones are kind of, I think, what a large part of us are concerned about, right? So we know that there's down to one zone, but it would be probably prudent for us to take a look to see what those are. And then, give us a bit more time before we go to this next step, right? That's what my concern would be.
Okay. Yes, we will extend that time because of the problem with the maps.
Thank you.
I would think we can probably extend it to the end of March. Is that reasonable for? Okay.
Yeah, just to give us some more time, right? Because I mean, even in reviewing that last bit.
Yeah.
The setback zone was the most important part, and it was sort of like conspicuously there at the bottom. It was hard to catch the first time. So it would be nice if we had some time to fully review the new map and then come back and have this again when we're a bit more informed in that.
Well, I don't know if we would come back to another public meeting, but you can submit
Yep.
your concern in writing and it will come to us to
Perfect.
be reviewed when we do our review.
Okay,
I know the mineral aggregate, we don't have any control over that. That's a provincial.
yeah,
However, we will try and work the best we can between the province
No,
and
no.
the repair.
and I understand like your hands are tied to some extent,
Yeah.
but like I'd like to have a little better idea of what we're getting our hands bound to.
Yes.
What, right? So, and I think the correct map gives us a better chance of being informed on that. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Fish. James Shiner, 9199 Nottingham Road. I know that, this was announced some other time. I don't know as well as a lot of other people. I said, you hadn't said something, I would have known this was going on, so whatever resources were used, I don't think was adequate, just for future reference. And maybe this was discussed a little bit last week, I don't know, because I didn't know about it, so. I worked all my life to buy my property, to pay for my property. I'm probably sure there's a lot of people here that have the same sentiment, they're nodding their heads back here,
Yo.
that I want to give land to my children. And just because some bureaucrat wants to have a setback for mineral aggregate, whatever. According to your map that I see today, the land that we've set aside for my children, because some bureaucrat thinks they know something, means that I can't give that land to my children? Is that what that means for them to build a house? Because the setbacks, it says according to your paperwork, that nothing can be done in that setback. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, I'm not a lawyer. But I have real concerns about me paying for stuff and bureaucrats telling us what we can do with our property. I don't mean to be rude, I don't mean to be. I'm sure there's a lot of other people here tonight that have the same similar concern.
Have you checked out the map?
Yeah, I was on that map right to the minute we left to come here.
Okay, so maybe, would it be good if he discussed his particular situation with you?
I think this is something, does anybody else have this concern? Okay, so can we just discuss it all like, when,
And we do too.
yeah, I
So,
know.
And obviously, we can't control what the province does and neither can anyone else in this room. That's the problem.
Can't leave it, yeah.
Maybe we should start praying for these politicians.
Well, maybe you should.
Right on our hands and knees praying that Jesus would come down on them.
That's probably a good idea.
I just thought I'm not sitting at that table because it doesn't matter what you guys do, you're doing wrong. You know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna be happy. So, you know, Lord Jesus, just bless these counselors, Lord, right now. Because Father, I wouldn't want to be in their boots, having to deal with everybody because of this one. So Father, just bless them. We love these people. And we don't know if they're not at fault. But Lord, bureaucrat somewhere.
You gotta call this meeting back to order.
All set.
I don't really want to be here. Just Kevin Markwood, 1491 Shoup Road. I just wanted to point out couple of facts about the buffers that are now set up at gravel pits. Right now, there's 120 meters. I was gonna bring my map, but I think you guys know that anyway. And that's a bylaw, right?
Yes.
I called to see if it was an aggregate license or requirement, but it's not, it's a bylaw, I was told.
Is that?
So with an area where we live in, low population, why would we want to adopt a 300-meter buffer when really a 120-meter is lots? There's no blasting in gravel pits or whatever. I know you said that was provincial, but you got nothing to do with it. But you do in a way, because you represent us.
Yeah.
So I think that what they're recommending is totally unfair.
Yep.
Also, do you know what restrictions come with that buffer? Like, is there any place where it's written down? Does the county know?
Want me to answer questions or? Who is your mayor?
Yeah.
For me, mayor, it's your choice.
Yes, you can address that.
You want me to answer it, right?
Yes.
I'll answer it. Oh, I'll just talk to the microphone so I don't have to yell.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Howard. I'm with the county member as well. So thanks for everybody for coming out. So I think there's a little bit of I don't want to say confusion, but just for some context. The township already has a zoning bylaw that has the mineral aggregate, has setbacks to it. What changed was the province changed the buffer from not only pits and quarries, but also from the resource themselves. So where the province has identified where there's natural resource, whether it's sand, gravel, aggregate, could be a bedrock resource. They've identified that they want to make sure there's a separation between new houses, new residential assisted uses, and those resource areas. So right now, there's already a setback. It's one, so for pits or any aggregate like sand, gravel, type of material, the unconsolidated material. Right now, the setback, the old setback was 150 meters,
120.
150.
I've got my site plan at home and I looked at it today, it's 120.
And then for quarries, it was 300 meters.
Okay.
That's where there's blasting involved. So the province updated those numbers and changed it. And then so as the mayor and Lindsay described in the opening, everything in Ontario comes in from the top-down approach. So the province changes, makes legislation changes or policy changes, and then that sort of trickles and filters down to the local level where bylaws are made. And so the province changed the setback areas for those resource areas. They doubled them essentially. So from 150 for pits to 300, and then for quarries, it went from 300 to 500. And so as that changes, trickles down to the local municipality, that's where you start talking about local municipal bylaws. And so the municipality is required to make sure that they are being consistent with those provincial plans and those provincial requirements and guidelines. So that's where we're at today. So some things, as was indicated, most of the bylaw, I should say, is within the municipality's purview to change it. It is made to make sure that the bylaw reflects local conditions, it meets the requirements of the community, but there are some things being a top-down approach municipalities do have to follow certain provincial legislation and provincial requirements. And that setback is one of the items that's been sort of enshrined through policy documents that has to get trickled down, and those are right into the policy documents. That's sort of, it's, right down with municipality, what that setback has to be.
No matter where you live, way up north, same thing.
Yeah, so they're all, everybody's having this conversation right across the entire county. Every time we update a zoning bylaw, every municipality updates a zoning bylaw, this is a hot topic because it is doubling that area essentially where it's not allowing new sensitive uses to be located close to those resource areas. There is as Lindsay mentioned in her opening speech, there is a provision that is included in the bylaw to recognize existing lots, where like a lot has already been approved, like it could have been pre-approved this month today, or it could have been approved 50 years ago, 70 years, 100 years ago, whatever it is, to exempt them. So essentially treat those as a grandfathered situation. So it wouldn't stop existing lots from a person building a new house on it. Doesn't stop somebody from rebuilding an existing house or trying to maintain their own property. It does not affect non-sensitive uses. So if you have like a shed or farm building, hunt camp, logging, contractor's business, anything like that, something that's not a sensitive use. Bylaw does not restrict that. It is just restricting new dwellings from being located within those resource areas. Is what it's mentioning. And that would be so not affecting existing lots, but so if somebody wanted to create a new lot, then that's when that trigger would stop that from happening.
So a person that has a 2-acre lot, for example, now, and if their 2-acre lot is completely encircled by this buffer zone, you say there is a chance that maybe they'd be able to do something with that?
Not a chance, they are allowed to.
They are allowed to.
Yes.
Okay.
But beyond.
But not if they sell it without a piece of property. Like that right doesn't get grandfathered in with the sale. And that's the problem, right?
So the question was whether that right to build on an existing lot can split that current owner or does it transfer the property? So the answer is it goes with the property. So planning in Ontario does not go by who owns the property. It doesn't look like who owns it, the history of who owned it. It goes on current use. What does the current bylaw say? When you sell a piece of property, those rights don't go away. You don't, or the new owner will assume the same rights that the previous owner had. So if you have a building lot today, you can sell it as a building lot tomorrow. Or if you have a building lot before the bylaws passed, you'll have a building lot bylaw after the bylaws passed. It doesn't matter who the ownership is.
But can you sever that piece of?
Severance is a completely different question. That is not what the new bylaw is looking at. So whether or not you can develop lots, we're going to look like development as lot creation. That is something that is looked at the official plan stage, and there's policies applied for that.
No.
If you want to create a new lot within one of the buffer areas, you'll have more requirements to put on you. It's not necessarily a no. Every situation will be different, but it is now harder. We'll say that it's harder to create a new lot within those buffer areas, but that exists. So whether or not this bylaw passes or not, that already exists.
I ask two more questions. When a gravel pit is finished and the license is given up, are these buffer zones going to be removed?
No.
It depends. So if the resource has been exhausted and the license is surrendered and there's no more aggregate there, then yes, the province updates the mapping and provides like municipalities and every year we get a report on aggregates. So there's also the aggregate operator has to do a license and the summary of making sure that they're complying with their license. So if the license is surrendered and there's more, say, aggregate around it as well. So it's not just the resources there, but say one pit could be surrendered, but there's a resource all the way around it still. But in short, if a license is surrendered and there's no more aggregate around it, yes, plans get updated and the buffer gets removed.
Last question. Seeing this as potential, is there any chance, like what do we do if we don't want these buffers? I'm not affected with land in any way, but I feel bad for my neighbor.
Speak to your member of parliament, I guess.
But or if we want to complain, we go to the member of parliament.
Yes. Because they're,
Do we write you guys first? Do we write up a letter first?
you could go to them, but if you write them a letter, CC the township, so the township is aware of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of anybody winning a case, something like that?
Joking?
From the county level, you ever, like, is there a chance for?
All these guys have adopted the provincial requirements.
All right.
Good evening, council and members of the public. My name is Jamie Hofling. I reside at 357 Greenville Road. So not only am I a BLR resident, but I'm also a land use planning professional. I co-own a land use planning firm out of the Peterborough area. So I actually review zoning bylaws for a living, and I used to be on the municipal side. So I understand exactly what's going on tonight. And I can concur that those aggregate buffers, unfortunately, are impossible to get around. But it sounds like staff have done a good job to look at the mapping again and make some revisions. So hopefully everyone can get their questions answered. I'm here today for two reasons. The first one is just kind of minor. But I feel like maybe the township could be a little more lenient in their policies regarding boats and the recreational vehicles. It doesn't affect me personally because I'm on a larger rural lot, but I think the 1 hectare is a little strict, and maybe that could be reduced to allow smaller properties the benefit of having more of those on their property. Given the area that we live with the lakes and rivers, it's not uncommon for people to have, like, I have a bull rider boat and we have a fishing boat, so we would be kind of maxed just if we had a smaller lot. So that's one area that I think that the township could look at. The other item, and I did bring this item to the attention of the county planners, I made a formal submission, and that's regarding the environmental protection zone mapping. I've noticed there's a lot of inconsistencies with the mapping. I'm a certified wetland delineator for the province. So I am able to look at that aerial mapping alongside the zoning and can see where it's not really lining up. Originally, I thought it was just the county official plan that was being implemented, which is what similar municipalities do. Like, that's what Madawaska Valley is doing. They're just taking the official plan and implementing the zoning. Whereas for ours, it looks like they've extended beyond that, and there's some new areas that have popped up. So this isn't just for my property, it would be for others in the area as well. So I was hoping to get some confirmation from staff or the township on which direction that they're going to go with their environmental protection mapping. If they are going to just implement their official plan, which I think would be the best idea. So until such time as that mapping, the environmental protection zone mapping, gets a full review, I cannot support the bylaw that's drafted, mostly just because of that one mapping error. The EP zone is extremely prohibitive. So it's really important that we get that right, and we don't need to rush that. So if there's any questions, I'm here.
Have you filed that complaint in writing?
I have.
Okay, so we will be looking at that then.
Yes, I just wanted to have the benefit to say that today and in front of my fellow residents.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to come up with a question or comment?
Marilyn Watson, 56 Shins Road. There's a few things that I just wanted to recommend. Shipping containers, 3.2.9. I would recommend that the shipping containers be allowed to be on rural residential, as well as the rural and the industry and so on and so forth. And then the C portion of that could be omitted, because there would be no reason to pay for a building permit on a 7.5 wide by 20-foot shipping container because we currently do not pay for a building permit for anything under 160 square foot for storage with a permit. And then I just had a question about the chickens. I know it says they're allowed in the dwelling unit. With the dwelling unit, does that mean any dwelling unit in any zone? 3.4.
Yes, I believe that's true.
So any dwellings, you can have chickens to an unlimited amount in a dwelling, as long as you have a dwelling unit.
Not in a dwelling, on the
On
property.
the property where there's a dwelling. So you could have a half an acre lot and you could have 500 chickens?
Well,
Just curious.
well, I don't think you'd be able to place a building to house 500 chickens on a half acre lot.
That's.
You could put more than that on if you wanted.
It's just something to think about when you're looking at it. I'm 100% in agreement with, if you have a dwelling, you should be allowed to have chickens. I have no problems with that whatsoever. I'm just asking a question. Dwelling lots, 3.9.2.2, recommended, a minimum lot area, dwellings per lot. I would recommend that if possible, I'm not sure if it's a provincial or a county issue, but I would recommend that instead of the 2 acres required for an additional dwelling, that we would go with 1 acre. 1 acre is a fairly large piece of property. The other thing I would like to recommend is mobile homes, 3.17. I would recommend that mobile homes be permitted on rural residential, rural, and also a mobile homes park zoning as a permanent dwelling and a single detached home. And I'm not sure what your definition of a mobile home is, but we can purchase mobile homes now that are 16 feet wide by 70 feet long, over 1,000 square feet, that meet all of the Ontario building code requirements. So I do not understand why you could not have a mobile home under that definition and still have a prefab home. Again, just a comment. And mobile homes are allowed under 46 section 1 of the Ontario Planning Act. 1 mobile home is allowed on a parcel of land, from what my research. Section 3.17.3, I would recommend to omit it completely, and that is the section where it says no recreational vehicle shall be occupied unless it is located within an RV campground. I don't see that reasonable in any way, shape, or form in our township. It was talked about just briefly with the last person that was here. If you have a recreational vehicle on a piece of property, and you would like to come and stay in the township to maybe vacation on a piece of property beside your family or relatives, or just beside a lake, and you're not allowed to stay in a recreational vehicle, I'm not sure where that would go. Also, if that were eliminated, section 3.17.4 could be omitted completely from that section. 3.17.5, I would recommend omitting that completely, where recreational vehicles should be allowed to, recreational vehicles should be allowed to be used as much as they want. If they're on a piece of property, they're paying taxes on their piece of property, and they live in the city and they come up and want to have 2-week vacation or a 2-month vacation in their recreational vehicle, 30 or 40 foot long recreational vehicle, they should be allowed to do so.
Yeah. Yeah.
3.24, regarding open storage, I would recommend that open storage be unlimited in a rural residential or a rural area. And at least allow 3 boats and 2 RVs within a 1 acre lot. And then if that were the case, you could omit section B, E, and F. Section 6.2, residential rural zone. I would recommend that we revert back to the bylaw, the current bylaw under the Raglan Township, where the lot area would be 2,000 square meters versus the 4,070, whatever it is, and all of those provisions. And I guess the other comment I would make is that if all future lots in rural residential and rural are going to be a minimum of 1 acre, which it looks like the draft stipulates, why would a person restrict shipping containers, RV, and boat storage on an acre lot? Just can't understand that at all. And I'm not sure if how many people here really know what the census is for our township. The 2021 census population in Renfrew County, in Brudenell, Lindop, and Raglan is 1,552 residents with a total of 998 permanent dwellings. And out of that 998, 694 are permanently occupied. So about 200 are cottages or whatnot that aren't occupied on a regular basis. We also have a population density of 2.2 people per square kilometer. And we have a total land area of 701 square kilometers. And also the other thing that people should be aware of is that in our township, we have 1,340 wage earners. And out of those wage earners, 995 or 74% of our residents live on less than $50,000 a year. The other 280 people, 21% of our township, make from $50,000 to $100,000 a year, 21%. And 120 people make an annual income of over 100,000. So I think if people would like to buy a mobile home and put it on a piece of property and they pay a brand new mobile home is over 1,000 square feet, is $150,000. I think those people maybe that are making under $50,000 a year in our township could maybe afford to live here. I have 2 children. I have 2 children, 30 years old. Neither one of them, they're married. Neither one of those children can afford a home. So I think we really need to be looking at some of these things in the township. And I think on behalf of all the residents of Brudenell Lindop Township, I strongly recommend that we extend the proposed comprehensive zoning bylaw for a minimum of 2 to 3 months before we make any decisions, so that as residents in this township, we can review, we can investigate, we can research, and we can look at the proposed bylaws across Ontario and across Renfrew County. I don't think that's too much to ask. And we feel that these bylaws are designed, a lot of them, for towns and cities. We own a home in Quinte West in Trenton. And yes, I would agree with most of these bylaws. But for my little country shack, where we have 900 dwellings in the whole township of 701 square kilometers, a lot of these do not have any need for. So our largest cities in Brunel, Raglan, and Linda are Claudville, around 300 people, and Palmer Rapids, around 300 people. So do we think we need these city bylaws? We are also like 1/3 of our population, but 1/3 of our population in the township live in quote towns. If most of these concerns are for the built-up areas, then it should be specified and stipulated in the bylaws. And I'd also please ask that we remove all sections that do not pertain to our township or any of our zoning. There's many zones, I believe, stipulated in it that we don't even have in our township. And if it did come to the point where they were in the township, I think the bylaw could be revised and recommendations could be made. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. As it was said tonight, this bylaw is kind of a standard draft that's used to come to the table that we review. And thanks for your comments, because we will be taking them into consideration when we do read.
Hello, I'm Edward Batson at 23 John Watson, Rockingham. I've lived in Rockingham for just over 10 years now, and it's not as long as a lot of other people in the room, especially with their ancestors having come here, but I've been getting to know everyone, talking to a lot of people. Kevin Hall says hi, Val, by the way. He had a lot of good things to say, former mayor, Reed, warden, and he's been fighting a lot of this top-down stuff since the 80s, he's telling me. There's been a whole slew of stuff coming down, and he told me, I'm retired, I'm not in it, but you guys have to stand up against the problems, because if you don't do it now, it's this trickle-down effect. So, I won't get into all the other stuff that you guys have successfully pushed back in the past, so thank you very much for that. Thanks, Val. But I'm curious about what are the consequences to saying no to the province? Because you're saying that we have to institute these. Well, you all councillors, you gotta vote on it, so you can vote no. And that's a courageous thing to do, because there are consequences. No one has told us what those consequences are. It's definitely gonna ruffle some feathers in Queen's Park. And I think it's kind of your responsibility as a council to do that, because we know our NPP is not. He's a young kid, 24, 26. He's just a yes man to Ford, and we know Ford's politics are very questionable. And he's not, despite what all the rhetoric on the site says. And I've been reading that, you know, the biggest line that jumps out to me about this, the provincial plan or the county plan, is to improve the viability of rural areas in Ontario. And I just can't see how any of this improves the viability. And this, well, that's the biggest thing we have to go on, is they're not improving our viability. And if anything, you know, it's great that everyone's here, because this thing is actually good, because it actually got us off our asses and, you know, got us together. But, you know, with the ideal world, and I know you guys are all underpaid and overworked, you know, including you guys, but we should be actually making like maybe a 50-year plan for the township to actually decide where these things are going, because I don't know, like, what's the plan for our gravel? Like, no one's telling us that. And it's just clear that they're reserving it for some use for somewhere else, and it's not our use, and it's not gonna benefit us, so. I don't know, and yeah, as Bruce, you said, this is a very contentious issue, like, this has been getting people all over up, so we're kind of one of the last townships to make this decision, so I would encourage you all councilors to say no, and let's see what happens. I mean, you got our back. So we got your back. And all of the people in Brantford County seem to have your back as well. So,
I think you need to understand, though, that the province gives us money, so their reaction could be to cut the funding dollars, and that will affect the ratepayers.
I know, and that is kind of like with blackmail. I don't know, does that seem right? Like.
Anyway, this is an opportunity to comment on the bylaw. Do you have
Well, I'm asking you all to vote no to everything in bylaw changes.
Hello, I'm terribly nervous, so I'm gonna try my best here. My name's Jody McComb. My father bought over 800 acres back in the 70s. He had 4 girls, and he always spoke to each one of us about the land and how the land is more important than anything else. We all were told we could get a piece of the land and to build on that land. Like you've said about not having money, I finally moved onto the land with a mobile home, over 800 square foot mobile home many years ago. And lived there for several years, and then moved away to have my daughter because we didn't have running water at the land. Waited until we had enough money to finally build, went back. My father said, here's the 200 acres, you can have it. But at that point, what we didn't realize that it doesn't matter if lots are side by side, they become one giant lot. So suddenly we're sitting with wanting to build a house on an 800 acre lot. Which of course blew my family apart because there's 4 of us. And for us to put a home where I'd already invested every penny I had would then block them from building or having anything on that 800 acre lot. So we were forced to sever, to have the piece of property that I had started to build on, that I had put time and energy and love into. Bruce, we finally have met. This has gone on for so many years. We had to jump through so many hoops, again, to get my home back, is how I felt. Not only were we affected by the aggregate and the buffer zone, but the rest of the property is affected by sensitive lake issues, an old mine on the property. And until I spoke to Lindsay just the other day, that mine finally got taken off because it had blocked the entire 800 acre parcel. As it sits now, well, let's just continue on with that. So we jumped through each one of those hoops. We went down every avenue that we were given. We talked to the mines people about the mine. No, that was August Quad back in the day. It's not an issue. This isn't an issue. The barn at the bottom of the hill, we had to ask how many pigs, cows, chickens you had possibly ever held in that barn before we could get the okay to build way up at the top of the hill on the other side of the road. The final thing we had to do, which I felt blackmailed into doing, honestly, was we were asked to go, the last stipulation for us to be allowed to sever off my property was to come in front of council and ask you guys at the cost of $900 to pass a bylaw against us on our property saying that we could not have any other residential buildings, uses, anything on that property. Which at that point, we had gone through 4 years of back and forth trying to get it. And I would have done anything for it at that point, honestly. I don't know if any of you knew really what you were passing at the time. But we agreed to it, and so did you guys, and I'm forever grateful because we were now in the position to build. And we have since then, we've built that house. And now that this new piece, this new draft has come out, we are RU exception 6. And the buffer zone has increased to now include all of our property. So now we can't even put a garage next to our house that we were finally able to build on the space where my house was originally. So just to give you guys an idea of what you'll be going through if you even try to sever it. So we are going to ask formally that the exception 6 get taken off of our property so that we can access it or have a second dwelling for my daughter on it, or put a garage next to our house. The other issue with these aggregates cutting across larger acreages, and I know many of you have larger acreages, is that even if the land at the back, we now have 200 acres behind us that cannot be accessible, because you can't put a road through an aggregate zoning or its buffer to a permanent residence. They won't allow that. So it blocks off the back 200 acres of our land and probably many people's land. So you know that that is something that is going to happen to you as well. So it has been a bit of a nightmare, and I do realize that we were in your testing ground phase for it. But I do think that you need to know how it affects people's lives and how it affects the families that are involved. My sister Sandy also tried to move here and was completely affected by all of the restrictions put on my parents' property. Who would have ever thought with 800 acres that we can't build, essentially. We really can't, and that so many restrictions have been put on land that's been in the family for so many years. And I do agree that it's wrong, and that I do agree that we do need to stand up somehow. We are such a tiny little community, and we need to join together with a big voice, and change whatever we can. Because it's not right. It really isn't.
Because so much. So I think this is. I think this is a specific, I'm trying to remember this, and it's a specific area. That's why I would suggest that anybody that's concerned, make sure you check out the mapping for your property. You know, like, so there's no surprises. And even if this bylaw isn't passed, we still have zoning bylaws that are in effect, and provincial priorities take precedence over. So, but check out your property and see what all the zoning and everything is on it, so you know what you're up against. Yes,
What is the legal date that this the zoning must be completed in Ontario? Like, what is the lawful completion?
can you speak to that?
Sure. So there isn't a hard date. So the planning, the municipalities are given 3 years after the official plan has been passed, which was back in 2020, roughly. Thank you. So under the Planning Act, after the official plan is updated, municipalities have 3 years to update their zoning bylaws to make sure they're in compliance with the latest regulations and guidelines that have been passed down. As earlier mentioned, the county run through official plan. It's the official plan that 10 municipalities across Renfrew County, they all share it and use it. So what happened was when that official plan was updated, all of a sudden 10 municipalities all at the same time had to go through a zoning bylaw update process. And we are beyond that 3-year timeframe. So nobody's gonna be, there's thrown into planning jail. I'll say that, like, there's no enforcement, but we are over the 3 years that municipalities are supposed to have that decision made. That being said, there's nobody is holding like fire to the council or them not breaking feet saying it has to be done by March 20th or else you guys are in trouble. There's no set date like that, but we are already over this sort of timeline that these guys just have to bylaw passed by, but there's no hard and fast absolute deadline.
Well, we were thinking.
How much land are
you?
Just, but if you have a question, you've got to come to the table.
Hey, Bucky, you do the front here, I'll wait for you.
Go ahead.
And another thing I'll add that because we are under the county official plan, the aggregate mapping is on the official plan. So even if we don't have a zoning bylaw, the aggregate mapping that's on the county applies to our municipality.
Variance one. I can ask if there was, if you wanted to look at the zoning bylaw, you can ask for minor variance, I think you said.
Case by case.
Yeah. Case by case.
Yes.
So if there's no immediate, like it has to be done today, no one's going to jail. And there's people in this room that are taxpayers that have been paying for years and years. And I know it takes a long time to get severances and permits and to build a house, sever land and all that stuff. Is there a legal problem with the municipality, these leaders saying, wait a minute, we're gonna slowly look at this process and slowly adopt the things that we can do, update a little here and a little there, which then would allow the tax-paying people, this residents of this community to finish some of these projects that they would like to do. And would give them the time to do some of these things like sever a lot for a child, get the approvals from the county, because some of that takes a long time. So that stuff can be moved forward constructively.
But
Is everybody gonna go to jail if that happens?
no, but even if you're in a mineral aggregate zone and you applied for the severance, the county OP would override our zoning bylaw, right? Is that correct?
I'll do my best to go ahead and answer. I'm not sure if it'll make everybody happy or not, but so again, just going back to the introduction that Lindsay made, what the zoning bylaw is, this is the bylaw that directly affects, like, so when a building permit comes to the municipality, what the chief building official would look at for saying when, where you can build that building. It regulates the actual land use, so the official plan, that's the policy document, it is not legislation, it's not a enforceable bylaw that anybody says. So the official plan contains these very broad words are saying, in the rural areas, residential uses are permitted. What that looks like and where and how a residential use is permitted in the rural area, that gets ingrained into the bylaw. That is the enforceable tool that the municipality has to say, this is when, where a house is permitted, or commercial businesses are allowed, or gravel pit is allowed. That's the legal mechanism that the township has to make sure that people are using their properties in a way that meets the provincial interests. So where it applies to, so the zoning bylaw applies directly to where people are building and using their property. It does not necessarily say where and how development is to occur. Development, I'm using that term as I'm using my planner jargon. So development, that's when we're talking. It's not just building a house. That we don't consider that development. That's just construction. So development is doing new growth or new land uses. So if you want to change the type of use, so if you want to, or like a property owner want to build a new campground, that will be a development. So if they want to change the use of the property from a rural property to a commercial property, that will be a type of development. If somebody wanted to do a subdivision, whether it's a big multiple lot subdivision, or if it's just creating a subdivision of one lot through a severance process, that is considered development. So that's where the official plan, those and the provincial policy, that's when those get integrated. Not so much the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is applicable because it ultimately applies everything, but the development aspect of it, all of those policies and the requirements I've heard what other people was concerned about, whether it's aggregates, archaeology, setbacks to mines or whatever, that all that provisions and requirements are already in place today, and this zoning bylaw is not going to be affecting that. So all those requirements that affect development, lot creation, change of land uses, that type of thing, are already in place. So what council is considering today is updating the zoning bylaw for existing properties what and where can structures be placed on those properties and what can they be used?
And we already have that in our old zoning bylaws. So
And you already have the zoning bylaws.
Yeah.
A lot of these provisions are going to change.
it's,
There are some that are changing, council's a lot, of decisions they're gonna have to make moving forward, like we're very concerned about mobile homes, chickens, receipt cans. So those are all aspects of the zoning bylaw that council can discuss and make sure that the bylaw works for Bruno and Dunraven. So BLR may be different from Madawaska Valley, might be different from Mount Brayside or other parts of the county. What the document you have in front of you, council has in front of it, is a template saying here's some of the not best practices, but common practices that municipalities have chosen to go forward. This is a starting point for the discussion. What is best for BLR? And so that's how like this meeting is important, making sure you hear from residents and making sure that it does meet your community's needs.
yes, and that's the reason why we want to hear from you, because we want to know what your concerns are. Like mineral aggregate and all of that stuff, we got no control over. We have the zoning bylaw with all that in it already. That we've been pointed out the changes to us, like the RVs and that type of thing. So that's the thing we do have control over and we will be looking at. So we need your comments and your concerns. That's the purpose of coming here. And we understand that it's a very rural area and as Marilyn stated, like the income of the people that live here and that, like, it's a difficult time and we don't want to make your life harder than it already is.
Hi, my name is Landry. I'm on Top Road. Regarding grandfathering, so let's say the changes do take effect. Everything that's in existence, now let's say I have 14 RVs on my property or whatever, is that going to be grandfathered?
Yes, that's correct, right? Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I understood there always was a grandfathering.
The grandfathering is a term that is commonly used for things that are legally existing now and continue to legally exist. And that is not something that this bylaw does. That's actually a protection that comes right into the Planning Act. So that's like we're talking about the top-down approach, the grandfathering and protecting of the other common term for you probably hear is called legal non-conforming. So this is a protection that the province has been in place for all property owners across Ontario. That if you had been using your property and you had legally used it, or you had buildings that were constructed legally at the time, and the bylaw changes, and that change to the bylaw then would make whatever you had on there not complying with the new provisions, you are legally protected, your grandfather, that the bylaw, any provisions in that bylaw that are go against how you have used it are of no force in effect. So you can continue to use that property as you had. You can continue to use those buildings that you had. You can upgrade those buildings. You can repair them. You can maintain them. You're not prohibited from doing that. So you can continue moving forward as well. So that's a protection that goes over and beyond the zoning bylaw. It's actually ingrained right into the Planning Act. It's a protection that everybody in Ontario has.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone that wants to up with a question or?
So I've gone through the the current Raglan and the current now and then zoning. Each of those have approximately 60 pages. The new draft has 120-ish. So there are a lot of things that are not included in our current zoning plans versus the new draft.
Okay. Turn the microphone.
So any other comments? Okay, I will, I thank you again for coming. We will be, sorry. Okay, if there's nothing further, then I thank everybody for coming. We will be, reviewing all of this and, follow the process through. Do we give notice? We give notice when the bylaw, before we pass it or after? After? Yeah. If everyone would like, will they get notice? Okay, there's a sheet at the door where you can sign with your name and your address and check if you want to receive notice. So we would really, if you're really interested in what's happening, then that would be great if you could do that. Okay, so this is, if I do the second call, the third call, third, anyone come?
I guess my only thing is, what is the next step? What is the next step?
There's
So,
someone coming forward.
Hi, Abigail Jennifer. Okay, this seems like having the same night. A lot of people's concern is, okay, sound like you're more concerned with the funding than fighting grants. Yes or no?
No,
Yes.
but we're concerned about what your taxes could be if we don't get provincial dollars, like we get a lot of money from the province every year that helps reduce your taxes.
So are you gonna, everybody's asked if you're gonna stand up for us all. Are you gonna try to stand up for us, or are you gonna be just a yes ma'am? Like to the government?
That will be discussed to council. I can't make that decision on my own. I have a council, we discuss and make decisions.
It still seems like you more worried about funding.
Well, would you like to see, if we were to lose, what would we get in a year, $1.5 million in a year? Yeah, we'd get $1 million a year, so if you would like that added on to your tax levy, you would see quite a difference in your taxes, so.
everybody gets $10 extra.
I'm losing 50 acres. What's that worse? It's just.
I'm not here to discuss individual issues. I told you that we will discuss it at council.
Remember, word, that we want to be.
Watch Mike.
Just a quick question. So you had said you were gonna send out a notice in the tax bills
Yes.
for March.
Yes.
So for people, for everyone to know about the new bylaw.
Well,
new draft.
we're gonna discuss that after we close the public part of our meeting.
Okay, so I would recommend, I think on behalf of everyone here, that tax notice, that information would go out on the tax notice. Everyone in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing is, so if it goes out in the tax notice for March taxes, how long do all residents then have an opportunity to submit their recommendations?
It'll be in that notice.
It'll be in the notice. Okay, thank you.
I probably can talk other than this, but anyway, what happens with these pits? A lot of my property is little gravel here and there, whatever. There's not enough for somebody to come in with a crusher, because there might be 1,000 meters here. Skip over it, you might find 500 over there. And before you can even do that, if your pit isn't registered, it's gonna cost you $40,000, $50,000 to go through all the loopholes and do it. There's no money in it. there's
Have you-
thousands of acres on Crown with good gravel on, why don't they hit back and leave us public people alone and let them build
Have you
houses?
looked at the map for your property?
Is it really gravel?
The map that I looked at here the other week showed the circle around and I might
Okay, well,
give my property.
There's new maps again, maybe you wanna go in and check it.
Yeah, but even
It
so,
would be
there's no gravel on that and the time I went down to Pembroke 2 years ago, if it showed a bridge, they called it gravel.
Yeah.
And I said, when did you do those maps up? And they said, well, they're off the M&R maps that were 20, 30 years old. All that gravel above me is gone.
Okay.
They've excavated it out.
I think we should talk with you individually because it's an individual issue with your property.
But I'm speaking for everybody. You have to aggregate on it and you can't build on it. When you've got all kinds of crown land away from town or away from houses, use that up. It's government land, they ain't bothering anybody, let them do the assessment on it, draw it out. Leave us poor people alone. How is our young kids or whatever supposed to build a house when you have it listed as gravel and you can't build? Who's gonna pay the taxes here after we're gone?
Who's gonna buy your property when you can't build on it? How are you gonna sell it?
I understand the frustration, but
But it's time for us to speak up, and just because the government says you gotta do this and you gotta do that, that's why you turn around and speak against it and say, you can do whatever you want there. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna have nobody living here. We might as well be on a reserve and let the government look after it.
Yeah.
You still get your funding.
Dictating.
My name is Lauren Tennant. I was a 234 1090 letter in the road. My question, there's two questions. First of all, when I was going through the documentation, it's hard to be scrolling through the computer, and I know getting a paper copy is impossible. On 187 acres, I guess this would be, if we don't want to separate, but my son wants to build at some point because land is expensive, would he be able to put another dwelling on that one lot that's 187 acres? Or because of it saying single detached, that it would only be allowed to have what's on it there now? We'd have to separate for him to be able to. I'm assuming that goes to you because they're putting most of it to you.
So I can't provide any specific, your property specific answers because every.
But on
property will
that
have the-
large of an acreage, it would still.
So so the province has updated rules for building on properties across Ontario to allow more dwellings per lot. So anywhere in Ontario, because compared to one province that has municipal water and sewer, which does not apply anywhere in BLR. But every property in Ontario that has the full municipal services are now allowed 3 dwellings on a lot.
Because on this, where it says RU, it says single detached dwelling.
So for BLR, you don't have any properties that qualify for that 3 dwellings per lot. But they did say that we want to allow 2 dwellings per lot where local circumstances are appropriate. And it can be supported by private services. So this is where, when the official plan was done, a policy was put in place for Renfrew County, and then this bylaw is now implementing that. So right now, in BLR, you only allow 1 dwelling per lot. The proposed bylaw has under the general provisions, I don't know the exact number, but it allows for a secondary dwelling to be built on each individual property, provided certain criteria are met. And so the criteria are different depending on the size of the property. So if you have less than 1 acre, you're only on 1 dwelling, you don't qualify for an additional dwelling unit. If you have between 1 acre and 2 acres, so 0.4 and 0.8 hectares, so you're between 1 and 2 acres, you're not allowed to do it as of right, but it's recognized that it's a fairly large piece of property, and if you do a study on the groundwater to show that there's enough groundwater to support 2 houses, and putting two houses on there isn't going to increase the density to a point where the septic effluent is gonna impact your neighbors. So if you can show that on your 2 acres, because of your soil types or whatever it is, and the groundwater to support it, then on 1 to 2 acres, you can have a secondary dwelling, but you have to go through some hoops. If you have 2 acres to 5 acres, there's different criteria for that. So between 2 and 5 acres, yes, you are allowed a secondary dwelling. You don't have to go through the extra hoops of moving the water and septic system, but you do have an additional requirement of those 2 houses have to share the same well and septic system. You can't have 2 separate wells, 2 separate septic systems on that property for 3 and 5. If you are above 5 acres, you can build 2 dwellings with no additional requirements.
We already have 2 dwellings, which was built back in 73 and 1906. So if somewhere away from the other houses he wants to build, does this bylaw affect that? Only if it's
So
ever.
it's not
So I have-
because you're already not permitted to do.
Okay,
So if the bylaw is not changing.
even though it's that many acreage.
Correct. So
Yeah,
right now, it doesn't matter if you have 0.5 of an acre or 800 acres, you're still only allowed 1 dwelling per lot. Currently. That's exactly now.
Gotta move away and we lose another taxpayer, like.
Yeah, he'll end up moving to the city.
No,
He's a tradesman and
It's not a public.
That's the existing bylaw.
No, but it's
That's
a.
the-
I'm okay, but we had people in the back speaking.
So that's the existing bylaw that's in place now. So the bylaw is changing to actually become more flexible
Okay,
and allowing more dwellings per lot than currently exists.
okay.
But she's separate.
But if you separate it, and there's additional, as we heard from some of the residents today, it's not always the easiest thing to get a severance, but if you get a severance, then that new lot also qualifies for all those things. So if you were to sever your 200-acre parcel into 2 100-acre parcels, each of those could have 2 dwellings on it. Or likewise, if you sever it into smaller pieces, even if you sever it into 2 or 3 10-acre pieces, each of those could have 2 dwellings on it.
What we're trying to do is keep it together so that it passes on the same, but my other question is, with everything that's happened today, how long, I know that it said that any comments wouldn't be considered, obviously, once it's been passed, but after today, how long do we have to put any comments in that if I go to bed tonight and think, hey, this is something I want to know, how long do I have to put something in writing to you guys?
Like I said, that if a notice comes out in the tax bill, it will have the deadline date when people will have to submit their comments.
Will you also be updating it on other, like, Facebook page, the?
Well, I've offered someone that because the mapping was changed, that you could have till the end of March.
Okay, also, I'm not sure if you guys know that, but today when you push, you click on the Brudenell map, it comes up as Linda. And Linda comes up as Linda, so Brudenell map isn't on there,
Okay.
so just, you know.
That's Google map though, or is that?
That's where it had the 3 different clicks to go. To do, where you can include now or the dog or regular.
It's nothing to do with that.
Well, it's an updated February 18th.
Oh, then it's in.
But it comes up Lindop, it's not for Bell, you know.
Okay. Can you tell which mine is staying on, you know? Craig Mount? Okay, is there any other comments?
How does the province decide what the zone stuff, their aggregate and mine, how do they make that decision?
Can you come forward and get your name and your address?
I can read.
What's your address number?
Hey?
What's your address, your name and address?
No, 4451 on the road.
Okay.
So yeah, how do they decide that?
Sure, so the province provides the produce value in the province, they have maps, these soil types, they've identified resource areas, and whether it's mining resource or ag areas, some of the soils mapping, they'll do different designations for prime agricultural areas as well, so there's all these different, so the province collects the data, They identify resource areas that they want these places to protect. So all those types of things. So in BLR, you guys don't have any of those prime agricultural soils, so you don't have, you'll see there's no agricultural zone in BLR. But you do have areas of the province identified as resource areas for mining and for mineral aggregates. So the province has, again, I think I heard somebody reference mapping from the ministry back in the sixties probably. So I don't think there's been any new or recently updated soils mapping, but it's essentially based off of that and then modeling the province has done. So they give to the municipality or through the county official plan, they gave us the layers saying here where your resources are that we are to be protected.
So, there's two places that so in the buffer zone, you can apply to build a house in the buffer zone, right? But a piece of property that's actually zoned pit or aggregate, whatever, you cannot, it says prohibited.
Correct.
So if that's the case, how does the province go ahead and zone a piece of property, two pieces of property actually, aggregate around houses that have been there for 100 years? Like if we can't build now, how can they zone up to that house?
So there's a couple of questions in there on that. So the question was, I'm not sure if anybody's seen on the YouTube. So the question was where you have existing dwellings in these areas that are zoned as the mineral aggregate, not just the reserve areas, but I'm sorry, not just the buffer areas, but the actual bits. And there's existing houses there, how's that get affected, and also how's the province zoned them? So again, the province isn't actually zoning, so it is a local council decision to zone properties. Depending on the municipalities, when you zone, you have to do certain things. So it is a bylaw, it is a municipal bylaw. The municipality is required to include in the bylaw certain aspects. So, but it's still a BLR zoning bylaw. So the province isn't passing the bylaw, but they are telling BLR.
No, I'm not talking about the bylaw. I'm saying there's two houses right now that I can tell you in the township that have, there've been people lived there for 100 years.
So
those pieces of property are zoned aggregate completely around. There's no buffer zone. There's no nothing.
Correct. So in that case, that's where we're having a brief conversation before about being grandfather or having legal non-conforming. So absolutely, there are properties in all parts of the province. This is not a BLR specific answer I'm going to give you, but yes, there are properties all over that have been legally being used as a residence. Then things change, policies change, or guidelines change, or legislation or bylaws change to make that house where it is now currently existing, and people have been living, a different plan for a long term or some different use. But that house is protected. They're legally allowed to be there. That house can continue to be lived in, occupied, renovated, upgraded, used, torn down, rebuilt. It is protected. It's legal non-conforming, despite
And the land around it to the homeowners actually useless
You're right.
because he can't sell it. He can't do shit with it.
You can sell it, but who wants it?
Well, exactly. Listen, what's good for the goose has got to be good for the gander here. If they can start zoning shit right up to your house, and that's okay, then we should be able to build where we want. It doesn't make any sense. The piece of property that's zoned aggregate right around your house has just deflated the value of your property immensely.
Not on the taxes.
But not.
Yeah, not on the tax bill.
If they can, they're making your gravel. Okay.
Yeah, who owns this? I'm not done, just a second.
Okay, no, I'm just gonna.
Who owns the sand or the gravel or whatever that's on the property that they've zoned?
You, if it's your property.
Well, then I don't, then I'm gonna build on.
Yeah.
So I
It's plain and simple. They can't prohibit it. If I own it, I'm building them. They can't, the province can do whatever they want.
We're going to have a discussion, a further discussion with
Wow.
council about this, so.
And as a
I
council, a bunch of townships need to get together and stand up to the friggin' province. This is what's going on.
Well,
This is ridiculous.
It should be petitioning M&R to do a new aggregate lending there.
You may answer that question or?
Yeah.
You guys-
We can't answer that question. We actually,
Yeah, so the question was who owns so where the provinces come in, it's private property, and there's now this aggregate resource that's been identified on the property. So and there's also mining as well. So there's two different answers for mining or aggregate. So mining, you have to check your patent rights that go with the property. So some properties have mining rights and have the rights to the minerals underneath the soil. Some don't. So that is property specific. I don't have an answer for you on that one. Aggregate, though, is the property type. So whoever owns the property owns the aggregate that's funded as well.
Okay.
The ability to extract that aggregate and use the aggregate, that's under the jurisdiction of the province. So through the Ministry of Natural Resources. So if you want to use the aggregate on your own property, you're allowed to do that. If you want to open a pit, then you are required that if you have aggregate material off-site, then you do need to get a license from the ministry. And what that province has done, they've said these mineral aggregates, sand, gravel, a type of resource. Province has said this is a resource that's important for not only current residents of Ontario, the population of Ontario, but it's a resource that should be protected and used for whatever. So province, we want to make sure that we're not put a building on it and putting in uses that could affect its feasibility to extract it in the future. So they said we want to make sure we're keeping sensitive land uses away from these areas to make sure that this resource is going to be there for future generations. It does not mean that the province is going there to take it. It doesn't give anybody else permission to come and take it. But it does put a restriction on property to say no sensitive uses can be around it so that in the future, if somebody does want to go in and extract it, the potential is there.
But that's just wrong. That's just wrong. Like, why should I be being, if I own that piece of property that's owned as aggregate, and I have no intentions personally of ever opening a pit, why should I be penalized for not being able to get severance and stuff? If I turn around and sell that property and somebody wants to open a pit, then they go through the progress with the province to get its own aggregate. Don't just zone everything aggregate and have everybody else put up with the problem. If you want to buy my piece of property and decide to open a pit, you go through all the process of getting its own aggregate. Don't stick it on a piece of property when nobody has any intentions of making it aggregate. Or use it as a pit.
If they don't intend on taking it.
Yeah, like there's a reason that if they're zoning it that way now, it's because they want it down the road.
You're right.
There's no rhyme or reason for it to do it this way if they don't have a plan for it down the road.
Well,
And as a council, somebody's got to stand up for these plans.
And this isn't new. This isn't new.
Yeah, no, it's not, you're right, it's not, but they keep expanding. Like you're talking about taking $1 million away, that's gonna affect the taxes. What I'm gonna tell you right now, if nobody else can friggin' build in the township and the tax, and you can't get no more tax base. That's right. You're gonna have problems too.
We understand what your issue is, and we'll be discussing it to deal with the bottom.
And they obviously don't know, they don't have a clue what they're zoning. My brother has a 4.5 acre piece of property that's on the Madawaska River. It's zoned friggin' aggregate. Now, how in the hell are you going to make a 4.5 acre piece of property with the setback from the water? You're basically going to dig a well in the middle of it, and that's all the aggregate you're going to get.
The same.
How can that be zoned aggregate?
And I believe BLR, it's very high in aggregates. If you look on the map.
Well,
And buffer zone.
there's the township is way more percentage crown than it is private, so let them go to the friggin' crown.
80%.
Get their aggregate there.
Okay,
Like, something's got to be done with the aggregate thing.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense.
so we'll be discussing it.
Thank you.
My name's Katrina Lukaski, and that's 6044 Palm Road. Moved here about 9.5 years ago from Vancouver. In this meeting, I just want to say how proud I am of everyone who has come out and spoken, and including council and planners. I think it's actually been a very productive meeting. I think as I hear more, I would probably benefit from this new zoning. However, I think we are witnessing a David and Goliath moment in politics here, and I would really like you to consider holding firm on the people that have elected this council. I'd like to point out, if my understanding is correct, that county council is comprised of the mayors of the individual townships, is that correct?
Correct.
If those individual mayors had stood up and had the support of their voters, this might not have come to this issue at this point. And I think that we have an obligation, or you have an obligation as council. And again, I just want to state how civil you have been tonight and how I really do feel you are listening to the voters. Possibly do reject some provincial funding temporarily if it means we become a stronger, better, more democratic community in the process. And that might give strength to the other townships around, and then the county could push back. And again, this is really democracy at its best. I just again want to state, I think I would benefit from the new zoning, so I have I think I appreciate democracy more than my own benefit here. So I really just want to encourage people to keep this dialogue open and for you to know that you have the people here have your back, and that's an unusual thing for politicians to have these days. So don't waste that opportunity. Thank you.
Steve Arms. 193.0. Just a quick question, I believe it was the introduction to the proposal to bylaw, where it states that if you do not make an oral submission or a written submission, you are not able to appeal. Just wondering if you could elaborate.
Thank you. So that is, you're referencing the legal jargon part that would, every planning act meeting, if you've ever been to one before, has that same wording. So that's a requirement right out of the planning act. So decisions that council make, in certain cases, there is an appeal mechanism where property owners, the people who have been affected by the property, by the bylaw, can appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And so the Ontario Land Tribunal, that's a separate body will sit above the municipality and can essentially act as the decision maker. So right now, the council is decision maker to pass bylaws.
Right.
If somebody's unhappy with council's decision, they can appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, who can either make changes, they can uphold that appeal, make that change, or they could refuse that appeal, or they could, an alternative, they could mandate the municipality to take another look at it, saying, if we've heard this, municipality wants you to take another look, you might change your mind.
Okay.
So to maintain, for a private property owner to maintain appeal rights, they have to either write to us, or write to the municipality.
Yeah.
Call your concerns or your comments or questions, or make a presentation here today. So either one, if you spoke today, or you've provided written comments to the municipality, you have maintained your appeal rights. You will have, if you disagree with the decision of council, you could appeal their decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
That tribunal is a part, you all just do whatever the province says. There's no judges on the panel at all.
Okay.
Well, I don't know the number of properties also, you guys are talking like over $1 million coming into the coffers. Try to help balance the books and all that stuff. What does that look like? You told them to go away. How does that affect us?
I can't understand you. You got the mic too close?
We told the government to go away and take the money away so that we can keep our property or keep the access to our property to give to our kids, to build homes, to pay more taxes, to raise the tax base even more. With all the properties that are in the municipality, how does that affect our taxes? Like, is that I don't know the number of properties, so I don't know how many taxpayers there are actually physically paying.
And we have to figure out how. You'd have to figure out how many dollars one tax rate raises. What is it, around 33,000 last year? Last year, like if your tax rate was, say, 2.50. And every time you would increase your budget by $33,000 approximately, that tax rate would go up by 1. So you figure in a million or more, it would be a lot of money. And then, of course, your tax rates are applied to assessment, which is very different for everybody. So, it's very difficult to judge unless you did it on an individual basis. But we will have further discussion on this, so we will be taking your concerns and dealing with them. Okay?
I know we're Grosky, 449 Miles Smith Road. I'm again sitting on a meeting tonight concerned about the recreational vehicles getting removed from property. Fourth generation, living on a farm out in August Lake. And my kids have moved away and had grandchildren and stuff like that, and they love coming back home. And I have 2 trailers down at the lake that I keep there, that they can have come home and have a place to stay. They can't afford to come here and build a cottage and stuff because they have their own homes and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind.
We are, thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you for coming out. And you want to go here? So if there's any written submissions or whatever, make sure you get them into the office for us. And if you want to get a notice, please sign on the door. Okay, thanks. Okay, continue on with the rest of our meeting. Does the county have any closing remarks? Does the county have any closing remarks? So, come back to council and ask for council's feeling on, putting in a certain tax bills. That's beginning of next month, so all three carriers get a notice. So do you want to go back to another public meeting then? Deal with it. I would think so. Okay. Okay, so we have a resolution that says the council for the corporation of the township of now and Dr. Ragland hereby directs staff to insert a notice of public meeting in the interim tax bills emailed out early in March. And further that the date of the public meeting be set for 2026. So we had a discussion about this the other day. And holding another public meeting, so then I get a mover for that resolution. So that was the next second by Councilor Blackwell. We had a discussion about holding a public meeting and we talked about what I think is probably better than because of election in the fall. We'll probably be doing it the Wednesday before the May long weekend or the Wednesday after. But anybody that wants to attend, I can stand during the city to be able. So we all are around, probably. Okay, so what's that Wednesday then in May, because we'll put that. May 13th, yeah, so we'll insert that in the resolution. And that's okay with the county? Yeah. So, I'll call for the vote, then all those in favor? Opposed? None, the motion is carried. Okay, and so then we will get the comments from those people and we can look at the bylaw as a whole then. So we have a confirmation bylaw that we, the council corporation, the township of Brunel and Dr. Ragland, adopts bylaw 2026-12, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the February 18th of 2026 public meeting of council, having been introduced and read first, second, and third time, and finally passed. They get a mover for that. Moved by Councilor Bank, seconded by Councilor Clark. Any comments, questions? I'll call for vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None. That motion is carried. And can I get a vote on the second that this meeting adjourns at 8:56 p.m. Moved by Councilor Banks, seconded by Councilor Caldwell. All those in favor? Opposed? None. The motion is carried.